don't know if I see. Sorry, I always have issues with Zoom. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in a minute. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the East Garfield Park Lake and Kedzie RFQ overview. We will be providing an overview of the RFQ process for the Lake and Kedzie sites, as well as answering questions. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to start with a round of introductions for the panelists. We're going to be providing a brief presentation of the RFQ, providing an overview of the sites and the process. And the majority of the time, we're going to be conducting a Q&A round. So while we present, we ask that people use the Q&A function to enter your questions, and the questions that we don't get to, we will be including in an addendum to with FAQs. So we'll start with the round of introductions. I'm James Harris. I am the lead planner for the West Region with DPD. I'm just going to call folks in the order that I see you on the panel. So John, if you want to go first.
Sure. Thanks, James. John Law, Assistant Commissioner with the DPD's Bureau of Planning and Design.
Gerardo.
Good afternoon, Gerardo Garcia, Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Planning and Design here at DPD.
Chris.
Good afternoon, Chris Chang, Assistant Commissioner with the Bureau of Planning and Design at DPD as well.
So Anna, I know Noah's screening.
Anna Robles, Chief Zoning Plan Examiner. And also we have Kyle Bartlett here. He's Assistant Commissioner here in the Bureau of Zoning at DPD.
Justin.
Good afternoon, Justin Peterson, architect and city planner as well, working on a similar RFQ in a different part of the city.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to start by giving an overview of our Invest Southwest RFPs, which we are now looking to export to other areas, the lessons that we've learned from that effort to other areas of the city. So as part of the Invest Southwest initiative, we issued RFPs of vacant city-owned lots along corridors and historically disinvested communities to concentrate investment and to further catalyze private development. Invest Southwest RFPs differ from traditional RFPs, and that we didn't simply look at general site information like acreage, zoning, and value. As part of this process, we looked at creating a community vision by having stakeholders meetings and community visioning sessions to develop a vision for each of the sites that we've issued RFPs on. From those community visioning workshops that we conducted, we illustrated the community's desired urbanism, as well as included or incorporated in these RFPs a robust description of uses desired by members of the community. In addition to that, we looked at the availability of incentives and connected the selected developers with those incentives to ensure a high level of financial feasibility. As a result of these RFPs, we received several proposals for each of the 10 sites that we issued RFPs on. Shown here are some of these proposals that we received as a result. So this map depicts the locations where we have issued RFPs. So to date, we've selected 10 developers to complete projects in various Invest Southwest communities and have been able to concentrate more than $1.4 billion in public, private, and philanthropic investment in these communities. So now we are looking, like I mentioned earlier, looking to implement an Invest Southwest model outside of these communities, and are currently issuing 2 RFPs in Avondale and McKinley Park. And we are now testing a new model, which are the RFQs, which we are issuing one here at Lake and Kedzie in East Garfield Park, and one in Woodlawn along 63rd Street. So here are some of the lessons that we've learned from Invest Southwest RFPs. We found that Invest Southwest RFPs really set expectations for design excellence and mixed use development across the city. We found that traditional RFP process creates significant pre-development costs for developers and designers without full confidence that they would be awarded the project. And we also found that RFPs, the RFP process could potentially create barriers for entry for emerging design firms, which is why we are now testing out an RFQ model.
If I could just add to that point, James, I think for the latter part, it's also barriers to entry for emerging development firms as well. One of the staples of the RFPs was this notion of community wealth building and development projects bringing local partners, emerging development partners to the table. And so obviously the pre-development cost for everyone is a barrier to entry, we recognize. And so that's a little bit of what informs the structure for these RFQs that I'm sure we'll talk about momentarily, but just wanted to clarify that one point that goes beyond design firms as well.
Thank you. So I'm gonna, go ahead.
Sorry, James. I can jump in here to talk a little bit about the structure. Obviously, this is a new format that we're trying out, as James mentioned, and there's a few reasons we're doing this that we can talk about. The first thing you'll notice is that we are issuing this as an RFQ. So all we're asking for in the initial stage is qualifications, and we're essentially creating 2 separate tracks, one for designers and one for developers. For the designers, we are trying to reach a national audience here, introduce new firms to working in Chicago, hopefully really push innovation and new design ideas for the city. So we hope to attract a broad audience. Another reason we're doing the RFQ model is, as James and Hardo mentioned, to lower the sort of pre-development costs. So from this qualifications package, we'll select designers that we think are well qualified to proceed. We're targeting roughly in the range of 5 to 6 design firms. That may change a little bit as we move forward, but the intent being that we'll ask firms as they submit qualifications whether they're interested in being a lead designer, and that applies for firms that are out of state. There is currently a line in the RFQ that mentions that lead applicants must be licensed in the state of Illinois. We are going to change that requirement. You may submit as out-of-state designers for the qualification stage as a lead designer. And if you are selected to move forward, the caveat will be that you'll have to then partner in the next stage with a firm that is locally licensed. So we'll ask firms to submit as lead designer, a locally licensed architect of record, essentially, or firms that want to play a more supporting role or interested in playing a supporting role that might be civil engineers, landscape architects, interior designers, et cetera. And then we'll host it. We'll have a jury, a third-party jury that will help to evaluate those design firms and select that pool moving forward. Similarly for developers, we assume most developers will be local, and that's part of our initiative to, as Hardo mentioned, to build local wealth here. So we look for developers that have enough experience to carry forward a project at this scale, but are hopefully embedded in the community and know the area well. So of those shortlisted firms, we then move into a teaming phase, and this also allows for again firms that are out of state that don't perhaps have relationships with developers here to interact and meet with local developers. So of the selected pools, we'll provide an opportunity to meet and greet, and then the 3 shortlisted development teams will be able to select their preferred design team from that shortlisted pool. Once the teams are formed, we'll move into this sort of conceptual design phase or proposal preparation. The exact duration will be to be determined a little bit. We're targeting roughly potentially 4 to 6 weeks. And the reason we're looking at some flexibility there is because we are trying to secure a stipend for those 3 teams to, again, help cover some of those pre-development costs and level the playing field a little bit. So that information will be provided as we have it, but we'll be moving forward to sort of a late November, early December proposal presentation to a second jury that will also consist of members of the public that will help select the final winner. Once the winner is selected, we will shift pretty quickly into the schematic design phase. We're assuming that these projects will need some subsidies, and we're targeting, just based on the timeline, the LIHTC housing tax credits through DOH, which has a late June application timeline. So we aim to get schematic design done within that window. So it's a quick overview. We can come back to this with any more questions as we move forward.
Thanks, John. So getting into the actual sites, we selected East Garfield Park for a number of reasons. We felt that East Garfield Park had a number of assets that made this a really great location to start this effort. As you can see here, we mapped those assets, and we found that there were a number of educational institutions in the area. It is located between the green and blue lines, which means that there is a density in terms of transit options. And then there are just a lot of opportunities in terms of vacant lots. As you can see here, the city owns several vacant lots along the Kedzie corridor and along residential streets running east and west along Kedzie. So we then looked at a quarter-mile radius around the Kedzie Green Line station as our first option to do this project, and we narrowed it down to the 3 sites that you see here on the right, which are city-owned vacant parcels adjacent to the hatchery and the Kedzie Green Line station. So just to give a little bit more detail, so again, here is a map with a different scale kind of showing the 3 sites that we're looking to begin with. And some of the project goals, we want to be able to leverage recent investment near the Kedzie Green Line station, such as the hatchery. We want to be able to provide a strategic framework for how these sites are redeveloped. We want to identify the appropriate level of density, mixed income, residential density to support commercial development along Kedzie. And generally, we want to be able to improve the pedestrian realm to increase walkability and safety along Kedzie. So when we started to develop this kind of pre-vision work, we recognized that that there was a number of vacant lots. So this map here shows both city-owned vacant parcels and privately owned vacant parcels that are within a quarter mile of the Kedzie Green Line station. So we looked at all of the available vacant lots to determine where we would want to prioritize development. And as I mentioned earlier, we settled on these 3 lots to do our first RFQ. So I think we're looking to select one of these sites for an actual development project. We worked with some design interns that we've had over the summer to kind of do some test fits on these 3 sites using some of the other projects that we've had in Invest Southwest corridors as a reference, using the -3 zoning, and we came up with these 3 models here on the priority sites. We then further looked at the other vacant lots to kind of imagine what a full build out would look like if we were able to bring these projects to fruition and then further catalyze development on the other vacant lots. So this kind of shows the 3 priority sites in relation to other commercial property along Kedzie, as well as infill development along the east and west running residential streets. So then we did kind of a quick scenario to kind of determine what the appropriate bulk and density would be. We had a stakeholders meeting to vet these potential built out models here. And what we found is that these sites, for site 1, we could potentially support an 8-story building that included up to 61 units of residential, 10,000 square feet of commercial. On site 2, we thought, as we kind of move south away from the station, that we would want density to start to taper. So we thought that that site could potentially accommodate a 6-story building with up to 41 units of residential and 9,500 square feet of commercial. And then on site 3, we thought that that site could potentially support a 4-story mixed use development with some lower scale residential adjacent along Maple. Then I'm not going to go through this in much detail, but we then looked at the various incentives that could potentially be available to the site, including the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, TIF, property tax incentives, new market tax credit, and then as John mentioned, the low income housing tax credit. So then in terms of the evaluation criteria and partnership, this is an overview of the criteria. So as John and Gerardo mentioned, we are looking for community wealth building, which means equitable control, ownership, and decision-making authority of historically disadvantaged business partners, reflecting the demographics of the community area. We're hoping to involve bidders that are Latino and Black-owned businesses, and to prioritize employment of Black and Latino employees. We're looking for developers with a proven track record of working in these sorts of communities in South and West Side communities of Chicago. We're hoping to encourage collaboration and support from community-based organizations, community residents, historically disinvested businesses, and aldermen. We're looking to promote small local business development and arts and cultural based businesses, community spaces, and entrepreneurial opportunities for community residents. We're looking for design firms and developers who have professional and technical competencies, professional qualifications, and specialized experience of, so we're looking at the professional qualifications and specialized experience of development teams, their adherence to the recently released neighborhood design guidelines and design excellence principles. And then we're looking for a developer and a design firm. We're going to be looking at economic feasibility. So that includes purchase price, financial qualifications, and total project cost. In addition to that, we're looking to create partnerships between design firms and developers. So the city and DPD are committed to inclusive economic development that increases the capacity of and participation of racially and ethnic minorities and residents who are members of other historically disadvantaged groups. As part of Invest Southwest, this RFQ has dual goals. One is to build the development site in the identified community area, and 2, to maximize the participation of ownership of local Latino and Black residents in all phases of the project. including but not limited to design, development, construction, financing, and operations. And the expectation here is that the bidding teams would reflect the demographics of the community area where the development is taking place. John, I don't know, you wanna add anything to this?
No, I think that's a good overview.
Okay. Okay, so shown here are proposals that we received along other Invest Southwest corridors, and one of the goals, as we mentioned earlier, is to prioritize design excellence, which means to prioritize inclusive design processes to foster equitable development. And also, as mentioned, we're looking to build local wealth. So to build local wealth in communities by involving, I know it's a little redundant, but involving local partners in the development team, to hire local contractors and provide leases to local businesses. And that includes 4 potential levels of local involvement, including on the development team, designer team, contractors and trades, and tenant and businesses. So here's an overview of the next steps. So the RFQ has been issued. The second week of September, we're going to start to look at responses. The third week of September, we're going to be preparing a short list of design firms and developers. Then we're going to look to pair those teams, and then start to work towards the middle of October towards developing conceptual designs. Then at the beginning of December, we're going to be looking to make a public pitch before we finalize our development team selection, which will kind of culminate in the middle, towards the end of December, in a press event. Okay, so that's all in terms of the presentation. So now I think we can open it up for questions. I know we had a few in the chat box. John, do you want to start? I see you mark some of these questions.
Sure. So the first question is asking if we can extend the deadline for the RFQ submission. I think unfortunately we've actually moved the deadline once already. I know some firms are just now getting involved or becoming aware of this effort, but my understanding is we'll be sort of sticking to the September 14th deadline. The hope with the RFQ is that you're able to use material that you might have prepared for other marketing efforts, really just sharing some of your preferred projects. The supplementary information such as the project understanding and letters of support, hopefully we're hoping that it's not a overly burdensome process to get that done. So 4 weeks, we believe, should be sufficient. Can you please clarify, next question, can you please clarify if out-of-state design firms are expected to identify an architect of record during the RFQ phase? No, we would ask that out-of-state firms submit their qualifications for their own practice. And then as we do the selection process for the firms that are shortlisted out of state, in the teaming process, we'll be providing an opportunity to pair up with locally registered firms.
Okay, so the next question is, you mentioned supporting designers. Example, landscape architects will be invited to submit quals and indicate their desired role. Should supporting the design team submit individually only, or can those teams also submit as part of preformed teams with the lead architect?
Gerardo, do you have thoughts on that? All right.
Yeah, I think the answer is that they should submit individually. We're going to provide a structure by which folks can later team and select, and as well as self-identify as how you'll be submitting. So that information will come out with an addenda shortly after this information session, with that clarification. But the short answer is supporting firms, if you feel you're a supporting firm, engineering, landscape architecture, et cetera, feel free to submit, start preparing your submittal as an individual entity.
So the next question, and this might have, so the RFQ addendum states that the SOQs are due September 16th, whereas the website states September 14th. Is September 14th the correct deadline? I believe that the 14th is the deadline. I think that if the addendum states the 16th, that might have been an oversight.
We'll correct that after this meeting.
So just to confirm, September 14th is the deadline for statements of qualifications.
Is it a requirement that housing be included in the mixed use proposals? So, you know, like I showed in the kind of pre-visioning work that we did, each of those proposals include housing. So I think our expectation is that this would be a mixed use, that one of these sites would be developed with a mixed use development that would include housing, which is another reason why we are targeting the June Life Tech application. What is the city's intent with the pre-teaming of engineer and other, sorry, these questions are moving as I'm reading. For stage 1 architects RFQ, given the developer's economic pro forma, experience and vision may influence the design team's composition of architect engineer teams. And then follow up, can the design team composition be revised for shortlisted architects during stage 2? So in terms of the intent, I believe we're looking to be able to have a stronger collaboration with the design team and development team to realize what our vision is for these sites. And I think I'll turn it over to Gerardo if you want to add to that.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a couple intents here. One is to, as we mentioned earlier, lower barriers to entry. So allow as many folks who are qualified to participate to do just that, and to create an environment where the folks that are at the table can achieve design excellence. And obviously, as we mentioned, we have a jury. There will be a criteria for pre-qualifying those firms. The second kind of intent here, which James outlined, when you look at the overall process, is that we really wanted to ensure that rather than a team coming to the city and the community formed, that instead the city and community could have a process by which a team is formed and a project is created and formed through that process, right? And so if you look at one of the key aspects or different, excuse me, differences between RFP and RFQ is in RFP, we were receiving proposals, which were essentially, schematic proposals for sites. What we hope to achieve through this effort is to collaboratively define what the project is with the designers, with the developers, and with the community and city, of course, all at the table. And lastly, again, this notion that by allowing this environment for teaming and pre-selection, we're ensuring that there's a quality and an ability to execute the projects with folks that are well qualified, a pool, if you will. So that's really the intent here. And I think to attempt to answer the follow-up question, I think there will be an opportunity for teams to form, coalesce, right size, or bring the right expertise to the table for stage 2. you know, where stage one is essentially creating the pool, and then allowing team space to come together, and conceptualize a program and a project.
Thank you.
And I
So
think that sort of
see-
takes us, sorry, James, sort of takes us into the next series of questions a little bit too. The next few questions are really about site selection. And then I think the answer with these is we are not asking for developers or design firms to indicate site preference in the qualifications. Submit your qualifications based on your firm and your experience, your project portfolio, and then we'll select the shortlist based on that. Once the teams are formed and coalesced, at that point, each team will be able to identify their preferred parcel, their preferred site, and then move into the proposal phase. So the intent is, you know, again, as Gerardo said, the project will start to form more in stage 2. So we're not asking for any indication of site preference now. In terms of site selection, there's a question about will teams only select one of the 3? That was sort of our baseline assumption. We want to develop at least one of these sites, and that's based on sort of market demand and a bit based on the city's ability to support from a financial standpoint. If a development team, believes they have the capacity to support more development that's perhaps more market rate funded, they could look at pursuing 2 of those parcels at once. But our assumption is that each team will propose on 1 parcel of the 3.
Thanks. I see a couple of questions related to whether or not, a housing component is required. As I mentioned, when we did our pre-development or pre-visioning work, I think our assumption is that each of these sites would have some level of residential included, which is, again, why we are looking to target the June LIHTC application.
If I could just add a little bit more to that, I think for the purposes of the statement of qualifications, which is really kind of the next milestone or matter at hand, we would certainly be seeking or seeking firms who are qualified to do mixed use and projects, which include multifamily residential. I think that's maybe the key takeaway for this audience, both, obviously designers and developers who have experience and are qualified or are able to put together partnerships.
So how many firms do you plan to shortlist? John, if you want to.
Sure. So from the development side, we are planning on shortlisting 3 firms. And those 3 development teams will have the opportunity then to select from the shortlisted pool of design firms. And I start with that because the number of design firms that will shortlist will be a little bit determined by the applicants, by the pool, and by the sort of, the necessary ratio of local firms versus non-Illinois based firms, and how we can ensure that there's enough of a choice for the development teams to choose from, but not so large that people are sort of moving forward with, without the potential to at least find a partner. So, there will likely be some design firms that get shortlisted that do not proceed to stage 2, but we're trying to minimize that to the extent possible. We also don't want to only select 3 design firms and create sort of forced relationships that might not want to exist otherwise.
Thank you. So the next question, the RFQ states that references should come from public sector officials, staff involved in project development, public agency officials, staff that negotiated a public-private partnership agreement with the master developer lead entity will be preferred. Does this refer to future involvement in this project or involvement in past projects? So the question is related to what we're requiring in terms of references. Go ahead, Gerardo.
Sorry, I forgot to mute myself. I think we need a little bit more context on this section to answer this appropriately. So what we'll do, Bill, is we'll review this section more thoroughly and provide an answer to this question in writing, just to make sure we're answering it correctly.
Thanks. So the next question, can you describe the team pairing state or the teaming stage or the developer selection process of the design team in a little bit more detail? So John, I know we gave an overview if you want to give.
Sure, we did. I mean, and again, this process is still evolving a little bit as we go here, but essentially, I think the teaming stage, we're assuming that once the shortlisted pool from developer and design side are selected, we'll arrange a time for everyone to virtually meet, present their qualifications, share a bit about their firm background and their intent for the project, and give everyone an opportunity to present and meet each other. And then from there, we'll sort of set a timeline on when teams need to be formed and allow sort of, free discussions amongst the team. We'll provide contact information and allow free discussion and not negotiations, but discussions to happen on the teaming process. In terms of the developer selection process, maybe James, you have more information on that from the RFQ, the criteria. Or I guess that we should just refer them to the RFQ itself.
We can include it in the FAQ addendum.
Yeah, but I would say the RFQ is pretty clear on the criteria.
So the next question, can you clarify what peer review design excellence means?
Yeah, I can take this one. What we're talking about is for your statement of qualifications and your portfolio, as it pertains to design firms and even developers, that you're presenting work that has achieved design excellence, and that could be through professional association awards like AIA awards, things of that nature. So a demonstrated ability to achieve design excellence through the profession and through your peers, right? That's the best way that we could define that.
Okay. The next question, do developer and operation entities need to be legally formed for the submission? Can we identify two separate developer structures instead? So
I think this is, go ahead, James.
Yeah, I think we included, so I guess maybe John, this is a question for you in terms of the two separate development structures. I guess I would need a little bit more information. It sounds like the question is, will we allow two separate developers to team before and with the submission?
Yeah, it's hard to answer this question. I feel like there's another one where we need some context. But if I understand it, it's can a developer basically assume two ownership structures to achieve a project? And I think this is
venture.
Yeah, like a joint venture, or do they need to submit as an LLC and be legally formed at the time of submission? And I think this is one that we'll consult with our law department to answer appropriately.
All right. So the next question, can we submit as a lead designer with a full consultant team, example, landscape, structural, etc. So I think we were looking for separate submittals from the separate design teams. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that was sort of mentioned earlier. We're looking for individual firms to submit qualifications. We can elaborate that a little bit. I think the one sort of nuance to that is individual firms that are multidisciplinary, larger firms perhaps. If they want it, they can identify how they want to be considered for the RFQ. They can submit as a design lead. They can, if they're locally licensed, they can submit as an architect of record, or they can submit as a supporting design firm. So perhaps if they're not selected for one of the design lead role, they could be selected as a supporting firm or a architect of record. But we are asking for individual qualifications, no preformed design teams.
Thank you. So the next question, will multiple teams be selected for different sites in this phase, or just one team, one site for this phase? So I think we touched on that. I think, you know, we were looking to potentially start with one for a number of reasons, one being the availability of incentives, but I think, as John mentioned, that could potentially expand to other sites, depending on, again, the availability of incentives and the teams. I don't know, John or Gerardo, if you want to elaborate on that.
I think you covered it.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so the next question, if we were in person, we would see who was in the room. Can we get a list of who's registered for today's event?
Yeah, the short answer is yeah, we'll publish that. Whoever registered through the Zoom, we'll have that information, as well as the session is being recording, and that'll be published on our website as well.
Okay. All right, so we have a multi-phase or question here. So
Some of these are already covered though, James, so you might just skip those parts.
okay. Okay. Okay, well, so number 3 here, can we use the same references twice? One letter for financial disclosure and one letter for the general application.
And I think, Bill, these are in the same vein as the earlier question. So we will take all of these together and answer them in writing. It'll just be cleaner that way.
Okay, so then the next question is also related to references. So I think we'll address that in the FAQ. Okay, if out-of-state leads are able to opt out of having having a full team, that could be an advantage. Can local firms submit for only architecture? We find it potentially presumptuous to assume the full team without having input from the developer.
I'm not totally sure I understand that, but I think we've sort of addressed this. We are asking local and national firms to submit for their qualifications only, their own firm. And in the teaming process, based on the developer's intent, project type, all of that, the team will be formed with the necessary supporting players at that time.
Yeah, and if just to reiterate what we discussed earlier, maybe clarify or be a little more explicit, is as part of an addenda, we will be issuing a way for firms to determine how they would like to be involved or how they would like to define themselves, whether it's lead firm, architect of record, etc. And that will be submitted as part of your statement of qualifications. And that will kind of tell us where you feel you're best qualified in that spectrum. So look out for that as part of an addenda after this session.
Let's see. So one of the questions is a preference for mixed income. So I think our pre-visioning work assumed that this would be a mixed income, mixed use development. But again, I think, you know, as we work collaboratively with the development teams, we would determine that through that process.
I see a question here. It's at the top for me. Can the site be expanded through the process? I'm not sure. I'm going to assume, I think what that means. And it's like, can any of the sites that are being considered for development be expanded? And I'll just say our assumption at the moment is no, because these are assemblages or sites that essentially are under city control. And so to expand any of them would, you know, delay the process of putting together a development proposal for any of these sites.
Yeah, and I think I would also mention, as we looked at the sites, there were some sites that, really weren't suitable for development, but if we were to assemble those city-owned parcels with private sites, they would be more suitable. So we were really looking to start with the sites that were most suitable for development, which is how we landed on these 3 sites. So. All right, so Bill asked the question. It says the letters of interest need to be for site 1, letters of interest from private lenders, financial joint venture partners, or equity partners for redevelopment site 1. I don't know if this question.
Yeah, I actually think this may be a typo, Bill. So we'll clarify that and send that out.
Okay. Okay, so this is about teaming up again. So can 2 local firms team up in advance and submit qualifications as one entity? I think we mentioned that we're looking for separate submittals. Has the community been well informed this is happening? So we did have a meeting with stakeholders during this process to vet these the massing models that we developed through the pre-visioning work. So we have been actively communicating with stakeholders in the community, and kind of as we start to collaborate with developers as we develop the schematics and the conceptual plans, there will be more opportunity for community members to participate.
There's a couple of questions I want to pair up here, James. This question, will community input be solicited for the shortlist? If so, how? And related to that, how will the shortlist selection be made? Who is the committee? For the initial shortlist, there will not be community input for that selection. Community input would come in the evaluation of the proposals themselves. But for the initial qualifications review, we feel it's better to have the review committee made up of design experts that can sort of get a better sense of the qualifications of the firms themselves. At the moment, our anticipation is that that committee will be formed from representatives from the city departments that are involved, DPD and DOH, as well as other agencies. And the peer review evaluators will be most likely from the Chicago's Committee on Design, which is a group that was established last year as sort of volunteer design experts that help to review and advise the department. Of course, anyone that is planning on submitting for the project themselves will be recused from that, will not be involved in the evaluation committee. So they'll be independent practitioners and design experts, and we will release those names prior to as we get closer to the deadline.
Thank you. So I think this is a question for you as well, John. Following up on the teaming process, if all design team members are going in separately now, can we be on multiple teams at once? So I think that's related to the pairing process. They're asking if they could be paired with multiple development teams.
At this point, I'd likely say no. I think because there's only going to be 3 teams, we anticipate having a pool that's large enough to ensure that there are enough design partners to be independent to each of those 3 teams.
All right. Okay, so the next question, does being one of the 32 pre-qualified firms matter for this RFQ process?
I'll take this. The 32, I'm assuming this is referring to the 32 pre-qualified Invest Southwest firms, and the short answer is no, at least not in a way that there's no crossover or automatic, inclusion into the RFQ process for those firms. There's a separate procurement or qualification process, and will remain so. Obviously, we encourage all of those firms to submit their qualifications to this process to be considered as well.
Thanks.
I think there is, one question here that's I'm seeing popping up a couple times is the notion of we said we're asking for individual design firms to submit qualifications. There's a question in the same way that developers can create legal joint ventures, can design teams do that same process and not submit as a pairing of two firms, but essentially form a new joint venture? I think we'll have to, Gerardo, I think we'll have to get back on that one. But it's something we can consider, but we'll hold tight on that for that.
Yeah, we'll clarify that for folks in writing for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, that addresses, I think, the next question. All right.
There is a question on applications being submitted digitally or in hard copy. James, I'll leave that to you, but I assume we're okay. I think given the national audience here, digital.
Yeah, we were okay with digital submissions.
It looks like there is some language in the RFQ that we need to clarify pretty quickly here that said that lead firms should identify their subconsultants. So as we've reiterated here, that is not our our approach has sort of changed after the initial RFQ went out. We are asking for lead firms or all firms to submit individually, no preformed subconsultants.
James or David, I see Alderman Irvin with his hand up. Is there a way to make him a panelist? It seems like maybe he wants to speak.
Let's see. All right, I'm just going to allow it.
To be promoted to a panelist now.
Go ahead, Alderman.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I was just listening to everything that's going on. Sounds real good. Glad to see so many participants on the line. This is going to be a great project. I know Alderman Burnett and I are excited to see this corner to be transformed, this strip along Kedzie. So again, good luck to each of you all that are participating, and we look forward to seeing some dynamite proposals and teams being put together. That's all I have.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you. So I think the next question, John, I think you addressed that. So I'm going to go to the next question is, can you elaborate on the community wealth building aspect of the RFQ? So I think generally speaking, what we're looking for is to really be able to have involvement from the diverse number of design firms, emerging architectural firms, and development teams to collaborate and to bring this development to fruition. I know that there is a more formal definition of wealth building that the mayor's office is using. So I think I'm going to turn it to Gerardo to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, the definition of wealth building is outlined in the RFQ, and I would certainly defer to that. I don't know that there's much more to answer on that end.
Okay. All right, so we answered the next question. All right, so for the qualification submission, if we are supposed to submit individually and without consultants, how do you intend?
Oh, sorry, I just answered that one, James, in writing. I think we've already covered that. Yeah. So the short answer is the pairing phase will include the primary architect and developer pairing, as well as the pairing of subconsultants and supporting roles based on the needs of that particular project proposal or the developer's intent.
All right, so then the last question, and so is there a shareable list of community stakeholders that participate in the preparation of the RFQ? I can share out that list in the FAQs.
But we'll share that list. But I think the intent, there's not necessarily an intent for applicants or people submitting qualifications to proactively reach out to those groups. We don't want to overload these people with many firms reaching out to them. They will be engaged and will continue to be engaged in the process. So, but for information purposes, we're happy to share that.
Okay, so I see another question popped up. I think we addressed this. Will shortlisted architects be free to select sub-consultants from outside the shortlisted sub-consultant pool? I guess the question is.
Yeah, I think we
what-
agreed. We agreed to clarify this one in writing. So we'll follow up shortly with that clarification.
All right, so that is the end of the questions. I guess.
This is a good thing to mention, James. I think that we can continue to receive questions, I believe, through the end of August. Is that correct? There's an open Q&A portion, so you can submit follow-up questions in writing to James or whoever is listed in the RFQ, and we will provide any answers on the website so that everyone has access to the answers.
Okay, I see another question that just popped up. Wealth building has also been defined as equity building. Are we seeing a variety of approaches, including the use of Section 8 vouchers for mortgage expenses, rent-to-own programs, and others? Will the city support these approaches?
If I could chime in here, I think in short, the wealth building aspect of the proposal is really where we're asking development teams to be creative. And so we welcome any and all ideas that folks feel ultimately achieve wealth building and will be evaluated against the community wealth building criteria.
So then the next question is, are the questions allowed only through the end of August or until September 14th? So I believe in the RFQ, we identified through the end of August, but I think it's a good question since we did extend the deadline.
The reason I think we'll stick with that date. The reason for that is we need to provide answers to all the applicants. We need to make the answers available on the website for all applicants. So we need to have that little buffer window to be able to provide an answer and make sure people have access to that information. So we can't allow questions up until the submission deadline.
All right. I don't see any other questions popping up.
Well, I think we covered a lot of sort of technical information here and procedural information, but I think just to reiterate Alderman Urban's, feelings here, I think the department is very excited about this project. I think there's a lot of potential here at the Green Line Station. We're really looking forward to your innovative ideas and really how to transform this community in an exciting way. So we thank you in advance for your consideration and your submissions.
Thanks, John.
Sure, we can give it another minute or two here if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll give it
any
a
final
minute.
questions.
I'll give it another minute. So.
And this will be recorded, by the way, as well, and available on the website if that wasn't mentioned earlier.
All right, it looks like that concludes our questions. So we will follow up. I know we have a number of questions that we need to follow up. We will do so and include that in an addendum with all of these questions answered in writing. Any last words from the panelists before we conclude?
I think John really covered it. So thanks everyone, and we really look forward to everyone's qualifications.
All right, thank you. All right, well, that concludes our pre-submission conference for the Lake and Kedzie RFQ.
Thank you all.